I'm Christy Freeland with Reuters. Thank you very much for joining me for a conversation with George Soros. It is, of course, a cliche to say that someone who you're speaking to needs no introduction. With Mr. Soros, it is actually true. He is a legendary investor, philanthropist, and best-selling author. The most painful thing of all, I think, for those of us who are professional writers here. And I guess the first question I wanted to ask you was, what is your view of the U.S. economy in particular, and are you a believer in the double dip?
Well, I think if I had to sum it up in one word, I would say blah. In other words, it may slip into double dip, or it may not. But it's going to slow down. There's no question in my mind. Because the stimulus is running out, and there's now great resistance for any further stimulus because the preoccupation is with fiscal rectitude. And it's a little bit too early for that because the economy hasn't yet really gotten its own dynamics going. And it won't for a long time because there are grave imbalances that have built up over 25 years of a super bubble, and it will take time to work it off.
So is this emphasis on fiscal rectitude premature? Would a second stimulus be a good idea?
Yeah, I think it is premature. Now, of course, you can't run up the national debt indefinitely. So I think that you ought to separate money that is spent on investment. This would be the time when you've got idle resources to improve the infrastructure, to spend money on education, and generally to put the money to work where it actually would pay back in one form or another. In other words, you have to separate what you might call investment account and current account. But it's very difficult to do, and I don't think it's going to be done. So as a result, we are liable to find it difficult to provide additional stimulus to keep the economy going. Now then the Fed is going to compensate for it by quantitative easing, but they are very reluctant to go there for a very good reason, because it may not be as effective as it was the first time they did it. So I think
have they gotten to the end of the road? Quantitative easing
well,
won't work anymore?
It's what Keynes called pushing on a string. So you can pump more money into the economy, but if there's no demand, then it won't be used.
Should the Fed even try?
Well, no, I think it's the appropriate thing to do, but I don't think it's going to be very effective.
So what about Japan, another country that has had a similar problem and is now suffering from currency appreciating in value? What should they be doing? Is intervention a good idea?
Well, certainly they are hurting because the currency is too strong. So I think they are right to intervene. But they've had the same problem. I mean, they had a real estate boom and then a crash and a banking problem. It's 20 years now, and they're still just struggling along. Now, I don't think that, I mean, that's a country with an aging and a shrinking population. So we are in a different situation. But still, it will take a long time to work off the excess consumption in this country.
How long?
Well, I'm not in a position to predict. And of course, a lot depends on the policies that are followed, but that's the reality that's confronting the country. And I don't think people realize how serious the financial and economic situation was when it collapsed, because President Obama employed the confidence multiplier which actually worked and actually succeeded in making the recession shallower and shorter than it would have been otherwise.
So he did a good job?
Well, in that respect, it was really a great success. But it's not appreciated because it's a counterfactual, because you don't know what it would have been if he hadn't done it. But the trouble with a confidence multiplier is that if reality doesn't live up to your expectations, then confidence turns to disappointment. And that's where we are today.
So you've said that President Obama, who was your candidate, did a good job in the immediate aftermath of the crisis. What about since then?
Well, I had some differences in how the banking system was bailed out, because I and many other people believe that you should have injected equity into the banks, because that's where the hole was. So you could have filled the hole with injection of capital at the equity level. But that the Obama team considered to be politically unacceptable, because that would mean that the government would actually have controlling interest in the banks.
That would be socialism, right?
And that's socialism is nationalizing the banks, and that is un-American. Now, this was a political decision, because from an economic point of view, the other thing would have been much more effective, and I think things would look a lot better. But interestingly, this backfired politically. It was politically unacceptable, but what was done, namely, instead of nationalizing the banks, we effectively nationalized the liabilities, and that left the banks to the shareholders and to the management. And then the banks were allowed to earn their way out of a hole. They had bumper earnings, large bonuses. At the same time, the ordinary public saw their credit card charges go from 8% to up to 30%. And that, of course, had a very bad effect on their finances. So that's the anger that was then fueling the Tea Party in Boston.
Now, that sounds like a pretty good deal for the bankers, but this anger you're talking about is also felt on Wall Street. You had your annual lunch with Byron Wien recently, and you were saying that many of the people there were very angry at Washington. Why is Wall Street so angry? Is it justified?
Well, they certainly don't like the prospect of an increase in taxes.
They can't afford it?
No, there was Obama is considered anti-business, and I don't think he's anti-business, but that's the general perception, and that's the source of the anger.
Do you think, with hindsight, that you were right to support Obama?
No, I think yes. I felt strongly that you needed a discontinuity from the Bush administration, because I think America went very far wrong in the wrong direction, and electing Obama was the most visible sign of discontinuity. That's how it was perceived in the rest of the world. This was a moment of great hope. Unfortunately, he turned out to be a president of continuity, not of discontinuity. He did not delineate the new policies from the old. And so he's inherited and carried on. And what disturbs me particularly is that we should have corrected the excesses of the Bush administration as far as the abuse of power and the oppression of civil liberties and so on. And that was not done. And there's continuity there too, and therefore the American national posture has changed, and that I think is something that I very much regret.
Is it too late for Obama to recover? Is it too late for him to
No,
become a president
I
of
think he
change?
may well recover. I think he may well be elected for second term, particularly if you have a Republican Congress and a strong Tea Party, and I think then...
You think that's good for the Democrats?
Well, I think that's certainly would bring the middle, because basically the American political system has worked by having two parties trying to capture the middle. Then one party went off in an ideological direction. The other party tried to catch up, and so the center of gravity kept on shifting. Now, if the Republican Party goes off into far right territory, then the general public may find that unacceptable.
Now, what about the American relationship with China? You've been spending a lot of time recently with some Chinese officials. What do you think the state of play there is?
Well, China, of course, is the great beneficiary of globalization, and now the winner after the financial crash, because China was not affected except through its losing exports temporarily, and maybe not just temporarily, but more permanently. So China is the great winner, rising very rapidly because the West is sinking. So the shift of power is phenomenh
Is it faster than most of us think?
Pardon?
Is it faster than most of us think?
It's very. I think I have not seen anything like it, and I think it's difficult to find a parallel because for the rise of a new power, it takes decades, and it's happening here in a much shorter time. So this is a very difficult relationship to manage, but it's very important that it should be managed because the world can't afford the world economy falling apart. So there are great tensions, and particularly with regard to the currency, because basically China has been so successful because it discovered or lucked in upon a fabulous machinery, a fabulous mechanism for skimming the surplus value of Chinese labor to the benefit of the state.
Without is this machinery called communist authoritarianism?
No. It's an undervalued currency because it's like taxation, except it's not taxation, because people in China can work and do work very hard, try to get rich, and then their labor is harvested, so to speak, through an undervalued currency for the benefit of the state. And that is what has made China so successful.
It has a pretty devastating impact on the rest of the world economy, though, with global financial imbalances. A lot of economists, particularly on the left, actually, are calling for the U.S. government to pressure China quite aggressively to allow its currency to appreciate. Is that a good idea?
Yeah. I think that the currency has to appreciate, but it has to be done in an orderly manner. And I hope that the Chinese will actually find it to their own benefit to do it, because